I want to do a bit more of a deep dive on the Mike White contract itself. I'm going to go over some film and some numbers in this video, so get excited if that's the kind of thing you're interested in, just because I find this to be a very fascinating move. The Dolphins were in a situation where, what do you do if you're the Miami Dolphins? You have this roster that feels like it could be a championship contending roster. It really does. You have that kind of talent on it. The issue, of course, is that really, it's the Tua health thing. Tua took some tough injuries last year, very concerning from a personal level first and foremost, but then also, from a football standpoint, what do you do about this situation? And if he takes another bad hit and says, you know what, I'm calling it, like this is not good for my health, what do you do in that situation? I was kind of thinking what you do is you go out and you just get a quality backup. Get a Jacoby Brissett. Maybe just re-sign Teddy Bridgewater. I know it didn't work out perfectly last year, but, it was small sample size. Maybe keep him in the building, something like that. They went out and got Mike White, someone who has had really just an insanely volatile career up until this point. What you see on the screen is his game-by-game PFF grades from his rookie season, and we'll talk about last year afterwards, but you see that there are 4 grades that are subpar, 60 is average, and 4 games that are subpar. In fact, 2 of these games are significantly bad. Against New England and against Buffalo, he posted sub-50 grades. Indianapolis, he was fine in his 14 snaps. I don't take too much into that. But then Cincinnati, he posted a 70 grade. This was the 400-yard passing game, and while it was just a 70 grade, the hype around it was certainly a lot higher than that. However, honestly, a lot of the plays were plays like this, and really very similar to this. It was one of the weirder games that I've covered since I've been doing this YouTube channel, where it was a lot of stuff like this, where, Bengals are playing man coverage here. They played a lot of zone throughout this game, but it was a lot of just scheming guys open. You have the halfback who's going to be running towards the sideline right here. Watch how Mike White takes the snap. He's going to get rid of the football quickly, runs the offense well, but it's pretty easy throw, and they're able to pick up explosive on that one. They got 15 yards. This happened a ton. This was an insanely common thing that was happening. Mike White was not throwing the ball past the line of scrimmage very often. He was basically never throwing the ball past 5 or 10 yards. He was very much throwing underneath, and it was working, so you give him credit for the fact that it was working, but this was largely what was happening against the Cincinnati Bengals. Again, it was a well-schemed up game, I thought, more than anything. But okay, again, just what happened here was he showed some flashes and at least showed, hey, this offense is working. It made Zach Wilson look very bad. The fact that Mike White came in and was able to really thrive in the offense made Zach Wilson made people kind of say, like, hey, Zach Wilson, what are you doing, bud? In hindsight, I think that probably said more about Zach Wilson than it did about Mike White, but still, Mike White got a little bit more playing time, didn't show a ton, but at the end of the day, you kind of had to go with Zach Wilson. He's the guy you just spent a second overall pick on. However, Mike White was eventually able to win the job back, or maybe Zach Wilson lost the job as a more accurate description, and again, had a very similar year too. These were his PFF grades, and I should clarify, I said year 2 just because I believe he's was drafted a little bit earlier, but year 2 as someone who has played football, where you see on the screen a very good first game against Chicago, which was his best graded game of his career, and even showed some above average play in week 13 and in week 14. So that's promising, although he did in week 17 have a rough day against Seattle, but maybe took a step forward. And again, for someone who isn't really been given a shot, I would say he has been able to show flashes, albeit in really good situations. The Bears defense, terrible last year, especially post-trade deadline. It was just a complete mess. So most quarterbacks posted very good PFF grades and stuff like that. But even that being considered, an 80-plus grade is an 80-plus grade, and you give him credit for it. There are some issues on his tape. I'm not going to spend forever on this, but, I'll just show one play of an example of kind of what he can do, the mistakes he made, something like this, where you have a receiver who's running a deep route. It's against quarters coverage, so typically you think, okay, a lot of defenders further deep, this might not get open. watch how when Mike White takes the snap, he is going to look further down the field. And I've circled a Buffalo player, and the reasoning is because that's a safety who was staying deep, but you see him move further in. He's covering someone over the middle. And this is what I think gets Mike White excited. He says, great, safety has moved in. My receiver is going to eventually start to run towards the bottom of the screen. This is a good situation. He can run away from the safety. It's those players right there. That's what I'm talking about, where, you see how there's kind of the inside leverage. Maybe this can work out. However, remember, it's quarters coverage. There's not 2 guys down the field. There's 4 guys down the field. Tre'Davious White over there is reading this play very well, and you could even just, kind of just say, this is a good Tre'Davious White play, the fact that he's able to read this. However, Mike White does make this throw, and it kind of results in a very easy interception right there. Again, that's not a terrible play, and I actually think that the Dolphins might look at this and say, well, these are his negatives. The plays were really are rookie mistakes. These are things that he can learn and grow from. And for someone who has not gotten a ton of time to play in the NFL, he hasn't gotten the opportunity to make these mistakes. And I think that's maybe what Miami is looking at is, well, yes, he is a bit of an unpolished player. There's more upside with Mike White than there are with a lot of other players that they could sign. I actually think that's why this is such a fascinating move for me and such an interesting decision that the Dolphins made, which is, well, I was convinced that they were going to go after a high floor proven veteran. They did the opposite. They went after a very low floor, unproven young player who has maybe a higher ceiling, and certainly has a higher ceiling than a lot of these other players that I would think about. And that's where things are that's just why it's an interesting decision for me. Why do you go after Mike White? Well, because there is some real potential with this guy. You look at his best games and you say, wow, this is someone who can really play. I do think there is a bit of people only looked at his best games and aren't willing to, pay attention to his worst games. It kind of became a thing, Mike White versus Zach Wilson, and he was able to clearly win that battle. But at the same time, is that really the win you think it is, right? Winning against Zach Wilson. I don't know how much I would brag about that one personally if I'm Mike White, just because, again, Zach Wilson was a mess, quite frankly. And while Mike White was better, he wasn't good. I mean, Mike White was not a good quarterback. He is not shown to be a good quarterback or a consistent quarterback. Mike White has had 2 good games when he was in a very easy situation to have good games, but maybe that's what the Dolphins like about him. The Dolphins kind of probably view this as, hey, we can set up good situations. We have Tyreek Hill. We have Jalen Waddle. We're good. We don't need you to play well when no one's getting open. We're going to be getting guys open pretty consistently as long as we stay healthy. That's what the Dolphins probably view this as. And again, if Tua does get banged up, the goal is not, well, yes, I feel like typically the average team views a backup quarterback as if our starting quarterback goes out, is down for the year, we're probably screwed anyway. But if they go down for 4 games, can our backup win 2 of those games? We've seen this with the Kansas City Chiefs, where Chad Henne was able to come in a couple times in playoff games and just be able to do a drive or 2 effectively and be able to help them win those playoff games. Or even, Matt Moore came in, played 2 games, won one of them against the Vikings, where he played well. That was the year the Chiefs ended up getting the 2 seed, which at that point was a bye week. They had the 2 seed over the New England Patriots due to a tiebreaker because Matt Moore came in, played well in a game, and they were able to get the 2 seed. That's the typical value of a backup. It might be different for Mike White. Maybe they're viewing it as hey, there's a chance Tua does go down for the year, and we want someone who maybe we could still win a Super Bowl with. And Mike White probably has a better chance of doing that because of his upside than some other players, which might be how they're viewing it. I don't know. But it's an interesting situation. But yeah, those are kind of my thoughts on the Mike White of it all. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. What are your thoughts on Mike White to the Dolphins? Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.